Hi everyone, I'm Al Rodriguez, and welcome to this series of videos that I'm going to be publishing online called A Very Opinionated ASP.NET Core Architecture. This is the very first video in that series, and it's going to keep going, I guess, until it's done. I only have a few of them planned out, but I know more will be added on later on. So before we actually talk about what this series of videos is about, just a little bit about me, Al Rodriguez. I've taken the name Programmer Al online in a few places. I have a personal site, programmeral.com, and as far as social media goes, I tend to use LinkedIn and Blue Sky. So if you're watching any of these videos and you want to ask me directly in social media, those are the two easy ways to get them, or just add a comment and I'll try to get to answers, or try to answer those as soon as I can. All right, that stuff's out of the way. What is this series? What are we talking about? Why am I making this whole thing? So over the years, I've been developing ASP.NET Core web application, or APIs, really just specifically talking about server-side applications. And there's been a lot of times where there are some things that I think are really helpful to our architectures that are kind of shunned by other developers. And those types of topics are usually because, hey, these things are, just less common. So why would we do something that's less common that goes against, against the grain, as they say, right? And I wanted to have a application where I can really show these things off and make the cases for why some of those things are better or worse, or, at least what are the trade-offs when choosing that kind of architecture. And so this series of videos is talking about those things. Now, some of these things are actually very common, and they're just hey, these are the things that I think we should be doing anyway. So, to be clear, everything that I'm going to be saying in these videos are my personal opinions. I'm not saying that it's better or worse than anything else that's out there. I'm just saying that when I go to create an ASP.NET Core API, these are the kinds of things that I like to do, and I will be talking about why I like to do them, talking about the trade-offs, right? What are the pros and cons of doing this, or doing these things, these steps, as we go through them. And so that is essentially the goal of this series. All right, so, and I kind of already jumped ahead. So, as we go through the series, we will be developing a new application from start to finish. Each video is going to be relatively short. We're going to be covering a new topic each time. The length of the video will depend on however long it takes to get that concept across. So some will be shorter, some will be longer. It just depends on how long it takes to really talk about that specific set of topics for that video. Some of these topics will bleed into other weeks, so sometimes I will say, hey, I'm going to just go ahead and set something up right now. I'll talk about this more later, and then, we can reference that kind of thing. Other topics will just kind of touch so many things that we will end up talking about them multiple times. So the big one that I know of off the top of my head is nullable references. Personally, I think nullable references in C# is an amazing feature that every application should be using, and I will definitely be making the case for that in some of these videos. And lastly, the big goal is really talking about why these topics, why developing code in these certain ways, it makes code a lot easier to understand. Simple, quick, easy to understand, and also quick. I know usually when we talk about clean code, we never really say quick to understand. We say it's simple code, it's easy to understand, but if we have a new developer join the team, how long does it take them to really understand the code base, right? How that code base works, how it's architected, et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of these things help make it a lot quicker to really grok what's going on in the code base. All right, now that's the series. That's what we're going to be doing overall. This video right here, this is just an initial setup that we're going to go ahead and do. We are going to set up some base features within our application. So you can see that there's already a Git repo created, and I'll tab over to it. It's a very empty repo right here on GitHub. Every every episode is going to just add a new folder, and so you can actually see kind of a difference of what we do each session. In this one, since we will be setting up a brand new application, there are some basic things that we're going to go ahead and add. Just by default, we're going to use .NET Aspire because I think it's really useful. Even though we actually won't do a lot with it, I think that any new application these days should be using it because Microsoft is investing very heavily into it, and over time there will inevitably be one or two features that will greatly help you in your local development. Swagger, I think Swagger is very useful to local testing, all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get that set up. OpenTelemetry. If you're not familiar with what OpenTelemetry is, I think a simple way to describe it is it's kind of an alternative to logging statement, writing log statements within your application. And it is an open specification that is implemented by programming languages or frameworks, however you want to call that. But it is specifically meant for adding observability over distributed applications. And so we'll kind of see a little bit about that as we go on. And lastly, I think every application should start with something for exception handling, and we'll see what that looks like. It's very basic, very simple setup for that. Now, lastly, in terms of closing this out, I want to reiterate everything that we talk about here, everything that I mentioned. These are my personal opinions, and these are the things that I think make writing an ASP.NET application a lot simpler, a lot easier to understand. And yes, some of these things are just kind of the format, right? Making sure that we do things a certain way. But I think that those things are a little bit helpful. And if I think that some of those things might be more work than they're really worth, I will try to call it out. And if I don't, then maybe you should mention that, right? So if you have any questions, just ask in the comments for this video, or you can just go ahead and send me a message on social media. And lastly, the very last video that I'm planning for this series, I will probably have some sort of Q&A type of thing. So if you have any questions, I will try, if I think it's worthwhile for the group, I will go ahead and try to address it also in a video at the end. I will try to respond ahead of time. All right, so that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and open Visual Studio. Hey, look at that. Visual Studio is already open. We already have a 01 folder over here in the corner, but let's go ahead and just make a brand new application. So we're going to start with just a very simple ASP.NET Core Web API. God, I love the naming conventions at Microsoft. Okay, so this is going to be a simple application. So this is going to be a feedback app. Let's call this feedback service. I think that works. You know what? That's not a good idea because I have some sample code that I would just be copy-pasting to save time, and I kind of already named it feedback app. So we're going to go with that. The other thing we're going to do is I need to copy-paste the actual location where we're going to store this. So this will go into the 01 folder if you want to look at this in GitHub. So as far as also going through this wizard, everything here looks good except for one thing. We are going to enable .NET Aspire orchestration just to keep that simple. And let's go ahead and hit that create button and give it a second. Cool, it's adding everything, all that fun stuff. Let's close that tab. Control-Shift-S, B, and then I'm just going to go ahead and hit F5 to run this. Just, sanity check. Let's make sure this all looks good, right? All the standard basic things. Hey, that looks good. Ooh, yep. All right, perfect. That's good. Cool. We can go ahead and click on an endpoint. Nothing's found. That's it. That's fine. Cool. Let's close all this stuff. Perfect. All right, so you can see, and as far as our defaults over here go, we have our main app. We have our .NET Aspire app host. We also have the service defaults. So let's go ahead and let's start with the very first thing that I want to do. I had mentioned OpenTelemetry. So let's go ahead and add OpenTelemetry to this solution. So you can see if I go to program.cs, we have this builder.add service defaults, and then if we go there to that definition, we have the builder.configure OpenTelemetry, and if I go to that, we have, hey, cool, awesome. By default, when you add the .NET Aspire stuff, by default we get OpenTelemetry set up, right? We get some basic stuff. That is awesome. I love that. I love that Microsoft is adding that as a default thing now, because it's great. Personally, I think every new application should be using OpenTelemetry. So just a couple of things I want to change. I'm going to go ahead and delete this this file right here, or sorry, this commented out code. And I want to make a few changes. So the very first thing I actually want to do, personally, I don't like having extra projects in a solution because there's absolutely no point to it, right? If you're going to share code, cool, but we know, right, as developers making this application, at this point in time, we know for an absolute fact this code is not going to be shared amongst multiple projects. So let's just go ahead and remove that. So I'm going to go over here, and we're going to go ahead and add a new folder, and we're going to call this startup, and I'm just going to cut and paste this file over here. And notice also, by the way, this namespace that Microsoft set for it automatically, Microsoft extensions.hosting, so we're not going to go ahead and make any changes to that. The other thing I want to do, just to make sure I have all of the proper package references, I'm just going to cut and paste this over here. Cut and paste that. Cool. And then I'm going to go ahead and just delete this feedback.service defaults. Right, so no more of that project. And you know what, just for the fun of it, just to make sure I did it correctly, I'm going to go over here, feedback app, and we're going to delete that project from there. Cool. So now, in theory, I should be able to hit Control-Shift-B, and good. The build did succeed down here. Awesome. So that's one simple thing, or one simplification that I like. But we didn't actually really do anything, right? We just moved a file around. So let's go ahead and add a source. Now, if you're familiar with OpenTelemetry, you know that you opt into storing OpenTelemetry data by saying, hey, I care about the source. And so if you were to think about it like, hey, we want to add the ASP.NET Core instrumentation, if I go to the definition of that, and then I wait for it to navigate, and then I go to the definition of this thing, notice that it is at some point, oh, great, okay, I have to keep going to the definition of things. Here we go. At some point it adds a source, right? We're opting into some stuff. So let's actually go ahead and opt into something a bit more custom. Now, by default, the Aspire stuff is going to go ahead and add our application name as something, but I want something we can kind of control a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy paste a file from somewhere else, just to keep things a little bit simpler. And this is a activity sources info. So this file, what we're doing here, is just storing some basic constants. That's all we're really doing. Now, we're creating our app name, essentially, and we're going to go ahead and use a wildcard here. And the reason we're using the wildcard is if we want to have multiple things that we kind of want to keep track of within our application, we can do that with the dot syntax, kind of a child. So the example is down here. In our code, we're going to be using this thing right here, this activity source. And so we're using the .root version of it. And if at some point I want to make something else like, I want to completely handle something else. Let's say, for example, you have a set of background services that are running, right? And I can say something like background, and then we know, hey, well, this is part of this application, but it is a very different path. And so we're not going to be doing that right now, but I just wanted to call that out, that that is one of the things that we can kind of set up for the future. And so we're going to go ahead and set this up, and we're not going to use what's built in there. Whoops. We're going to say .add source and .app source. Oh nope. Let's see. I think I set that up wrong. Let me look at my sample code where I did this already. Oh, that's right. It's a string. And more specifically, we need to use that wildcard. That's right. That's where I messed up. I even called it out, right? I talked about that wildcard for, other child things, right, that we may want to add into the future. So, perfect. That's good. Now this is working, and now we have, OpenTelemetry added to this. Cool. I want to go a step further. So, one of the things with .NET that is very confusing when you start using OpenTelemetry with it is that there are two completely separate APIs that you can use for doing OpenTelemetry stuff within your application. And the reason for that is historical stuff. So Microsoft, when developing .NET, C#, all that stuff, they already had some stuff in there, the activity classes, and they already had that in there for observability of your application. And then separately from that, OpenTelemetry came along as an open standard, and they have their own API that they recommend, and they say, hey, if you're using the OpenTelemetry API or the SDK, these are the classes, these are the methods, these are the things that you should be using, right? Their own terminology, things like traces and spans. And so now, Microsoft said, hey, that's cool. We can still have our stuff write to that, or we can have these things write to the same stuff, but at Microsoft, they're only going to support the API that they created. Now, separately, there is the OpenTelemetry SDK, which is just a wrapper, really, around the Microsoft stuff. Now, personally, because I like the OpenTelemetry stuff, I prefer using that SDK, that API methods and classes and that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and set that up. Let's go ahead and start using that. So down here, back over here in our program.cs, we're just going to go ahead and register something. And I'm looking away from the camera, but I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste some code right over here. This set of lines right here, this is going to go ahead and register the tracer. So the tracer object, that's something from the OpenTelemetry SDK. And what we're doing here is we're registering with our IOC container to say, hey, let's go ahead and when we want to make our child spans and all of that fun stuff, we're going to use something using, hey, there we go, our activity source, right? That thing that we created earlier, right? So that whole name, and so in this case, the .name is going to be this whole thing. So feedback-app.root. Hey, awesome, cool. Oh, whoops, I have a typo there. Should have gotten rid of that dot. Okay, all right. So now we're able to get that. So just as an example, if I were to go over here to our controllers and click on this weather forecast controller, let's go ahead and get rid of this iLogger thing, because you know what? We're using OpenTelemetry. We don't need our logger. So let's say, hey, oops, tracer, and then private read only, tracer equals tracer. Awesome. And so I can go ahead down here into this get, and I can say tracer dot start active span, and I'm going to say, my get, this is just an example, right? Using var span is that, and I can say, hey, let's add an attribute. So let's see, let's set an attribute, and it's going to be something stupid, right? AAA, and that's going to be datetime dot UTC now dot toString. Perfect, right? So in a minute, we're going to actually see this in practice. But right now, just trust me when I say, hey, now we have OpenTelemetry set up, and we're using the SDK, right? The OpenTelemetry specific SDK, not the one built into .NET. And again, this is all preference. You can use whatever you want, right? As you can even see in the documentation right there, this tracer, this SDK is just a wrapper around the stuff that's already built into .NET. In this case, the activity source class. Okay, so looking back at my list over there, we have OpenTelemetry set up. We have Aspire mostly set up. The next thing I want to do, I want to start testing some of this stuff. So let's go ahead and add Swagger, right? Let's make it a little bit easier for us to go ahead and test this. So thankfully, by default, we kind of already have OpenAPI already added to our application. Now, if you're not familiar, or if, hey, maybe you've only ever used Swagger, there is a difference, and I could be getting some of this wrong. My understanding, just to make sure, just calling out that I might be wrong, OpenAPI is the specification. Swagger is essentially the tools, the UI, the thing that we use to surface the OpenAPI stuff. So if we want to go ahead and set that up, there are the two things. We have to say, hey, our application has to create the OpenAPI stuff that meets the standard, and then separately we're going to throw Swagger in there so that we have some kind of UI to work with it, to be able to view that stuff, right? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of copy paste some stuff over here. I have kind of added some stuff into a kind of a shared method over here, so let's add that. I'm going to scroll down here back into our extensions.cs file, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste this method down here. Perfect. Add OpenAPI services, and add Swagger gen. I must be missing a NuGet package. I'm sorry about that. Let me copy paste that over here. Perfect. So needed this NuGet package, and there we go. Now we have our Swagger stuff. So the build succeeded down there in the bottom left corner. So just a reminder of what we've added. Right, we've added the Open API stuff, and then here we're adding Swagger to be able to understand, like, hey, what are the endpoints and all that kind of stuff, and to be able to try and start using the UI. But we're not there exactly. Let's scroll back down over here, the program CS file. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we're just going to replace it with another helper method. Then I am going to go ahead and copy paste from my other code that I have over here. And so this is going to be called add Open API UI. And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy paste that again from over there into this extensions class. Yeah, sure, right here is a good spot. Why not? And so we're doing a couple of things. We are checking, is this only in our local development? Just because that's usually a good default, I guess. Okay. From a security standpoint, you don't want attackers to be able to easily understand your environment. Okay, cool, I get that. It's one of those things that as a developer, it rubs me the wrong way that we have to make code work differently in one environment versus another. I'm not a fan of that, but I understand why we do that. Security is done in layers. Okay, moving on, tangent over. The other stuff we're doing. Notice that we're adding UI stuff, right? So we're mapping the OpenAPI stuff that was generated originally, and then I'm not 100% sure why we need both of these, but we're saying, hey, add Swagger to this and go ahead and add the UI. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 and let's start testing some of those things that we've already gone and set up. So we have our application here in Aspire. Let's go ahead and click on the HTTPS endpoint. Nothing there, that's fine, but let's go ahead and add the Swagger endpoint, and there we go. Now we have our Swagger stuff, and let's go ahead and try out this method. So I'm going to click it a few times. Cool, we're good. We get some responses. All right, that's awesome. Let's close this. Let's make sure that OpenTelemetry stuff worked. So that is going to be over here on the left. We'll click on Traces, and I think the newest is on the bottom. Yes, newest is on the bottom, so we'll go ahead and click on that one. And we see, hey, there's that myGet, right? There's that span that we added. I can go back to the code. Oops. That is over here, and we have the my-get activity, right, that span. And so that means if we click on it, we should see that AAA attribute that we added. Awesome. So now we have that key value pair, and that is the date time in UTC. Awesome. So Swagger is working, and so is OpenTelemetry. Great. There is one thing I didn't really like though about this setup. The purpose of Aspire, one of the big purposes of Aspire, is to make your local development a lot easier. And I didn't like that I had to click on this link over here and then type in Swagger. Let's simplify that a little bit, right? Let's just add that already to our list. So we can go ahead and do that by going into the app host over here and clicking on the program.cs. And we're just going to go ahead and add something really simple. So I do have to check really quickly. The application itself, by default, launch settings, we're going to this port. So we're going to add, let's see, with URL? Nope. With endpoint. With endpoint. You know what? That might not be correct. I need to look at my other sample code. It is with URL. Okay, I did mess that up. All right. With URL. Swagger. Let's see, and why is that not finding it? Oh no. What happened there? Let's see, not sure why it's not liking that. Oh no. You know what? I know what the problem is. I need to update some NuGets. So that's normally a step that I like to do at the beginning. Forgot to do that here. So let's select a bunch of packages. There we go. This is something I kind of was skipping over. Personally, I want to update things to the latest and greatest as soon as possible. And the reason for that is you don't always know when you'll be able to upgrade. And you don't always know when you'll have time to fix those upgrades. So something that I like to do is at the start of a sprint, update all of our packages. And if there's any issues, then we can figure out what they are during that sprint. And then if we need to, we can roll back if we absolutely have to, right? If we don't have the time, if it turns out to be too difficult, sure, we can do that. But when possible, I like to always update those NuGets. So anyway, updating to the latest versions of whatever those NuGets were, we do have that endpoint. So now we can go ahead and hit F5, run this, and now we'll be able to see that, hey, now I have Swagger, so now it's a little bit easier to go ahead and get to. Awesome. So that saved us a little bit of time, right? From our development loop, that made things a little bit better. So next up, we want to add some exception handling, right? Right now, if our application throws an exception, it's not the best, right? So let's go ahead and, as an example, I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste some of this. Well, I guess I'm going to delete a lot of this. I'm going to go ahead, public void, and let's go ahead and do a post. And let's get rid of some of this code over here. All right, cool. I don't care. So let's throw new not implemented exception. Perfect, right? So now if I go ahead, hit F5, let's run this. Wait a second. All right, go to Swagger, and let's do our post. We get stopped in Visual Studio because we're running that, but the thing we actually care about is, hey, you know, we're getting this non-implemented exception, we get the full stack trace, right? We get some ugly stuff. We should control this a little bit better. So we're going to do that by adding a couple of things to our application. First of all, let's add some standard exceptions, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste some stuff from my sample code over here, and you'll see that we've added this extensions folder, and we have two classes. We have HTTP exception base and basic exception. So looking at the first one, HTTP exception base, this is an abstract class. Notice that it takes a string for whatever the error is and an HTTP status code. And that status code, that's going to be what's returned from our application by some middleware. We have not yet implemented that. We'll do that in a second. And then over here we have basic exception. Honestly, we should be writing specific exceptions, probably, I guess. I don't know. The string is really what we look at. So that's one of those things that really just depends on your mood, I guess. But you know, the important thing is, you know, what's that HTTP status code and what's the error message? What's that text that we're going to go ahead and return? So that's essentially what we're doing. So let's say instead of a not implemented exception, let's throw a new basic exception, not implemented yet. Hold on. Let's see, I should probably do that correctly. And you know what? I'm never sure if I spelled the word implemented correctly. That's probably wrong. Just statistically, I probably did that wrong. And let's say, you know, let's say it's a bad request. You know, we can lie. We can say, you know, it's your fault for calling it, right? Just as an example. This is all demo code. This entire control is going to get deleted in one of the future videos. So that's why I don't care too much about this. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit F5. Let's look at this. And we have not actually implemented anything to make this look nice. So if I try it out and execute, and then F5 through that, sorry about that, I keep forgetting. It's the same as before, right? Just like the not implemented exception. So let's go ahead and close this stuff. And let's add something that will actually make that look a little bit nicer to the receiver. And that is going to be implemented with some middleware. So let me copy paste some code over here. We've added this middleware folder with this exception catch middleware. A stupid name, not very you know, fancy, but it's very descriptive, so I think it's very useful. Now this middleware is you know, just like any other middleware, invoke async. We're going to do some stuff. We're just going to try catch everything that it's running, and then we will go ahead and catch any exception. I know we shouldn't catch any exception. That is something that is suggested to not be done, but also this needs to catch everything, right? Because we need to control what we return to the clients. So in this case, it's fine. It's perfectly valid. So we're going to do a couple of things, and very first thing that we're going to do, just record any exception with OpenTelemetry. We're just going to go ahead and you know, set the error attributes and that kind of stuff. Then we're going to check, hey, is this one of those HTTP base exceptions that we control in our application? If so, let's use that error. You know, otherwise, you know, if this is something else that we didn't throw, like a no reference or index out of range, something like that, we're gonna just say, hey, it's definitely our fault, internal server error, you know, all that stuff. Next up, this is up for debate. In general, right, we don't want to return internal workings of our application from an exception. I just wanted to throw this in here just as an example of like, hey, you can, you know, modify whatever you want. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and create an error response object and go ahead and set that as the actual response. I wish this part on the bottom was a little bit easier in terms of returning, right? If I could just return an object, but apparently no, we have to write it out as the you know, JSON or as however we're sending it back. Now, you may have noticed something about this error response object. If I go to the definition, that's actually up here at the top of this middleware, and more importantly, it's an embedded record within this class. I'm going to keep doing that. This is one of those things that I'm not really going to call out explicitly, but I do want to mention that, hey, this concept of throwing a record inside of a class, I feel, is something that shows to other developers, or shows a developer, like, hey, this thing is only used here. It'll be returned, but as far as what generates a new instance of this class, that'll only happen here. And yeah, within our code, anything can do that, but we really shouldn't, because then things get ugly, and it's harder to understand. So I think that this is one of those things that I was mentioning earlier is helpful from us, or is helpful to us as developers in our code to really understand how our code, or sorry, to really get up to date quickly with our code. And again, yes, this is something you have to remember. You have to remember that this is the pattern within our application. But if you understand that, then that means traversing this code is a little bit easier to understand, because hey, you know where it is. You know exactly where it is. In the or if it's only used here, it's only going to be used within this class. All right, now that's our middleware, right? Very simple thing. Try catch, just set some exception stuff and return that error instead. But now we have to actually use it. So let's go back to our program CS down here in our app when we're setting up our middleware, and we're just going to go ahead and set that. So what's that? So app.use, and I already forgot the name of it. I'm just going to copy paste that, and perfect. So that should be good. Oh no, let's see. Was it used middleware? Did I? All right, I did forget that. All right, use middleware. Great, so let's hit F5. Let's run through this. Give that a second. Okay. Now we've got our Swagger. We can try it out. Let's go ahead and execute it. Ugh, gotta wait on that. All right. And hey, there we go. So not implemented yet. Hold on. Looks like we have some extra line returns. So something we gotta work on. We have our trace ID, right? That's our OpenTelemetry trace ID. And again, that's just, optional of just showing, hey, we can go ahead and add whatever we want to the response. And in this case, hey, there's our error 400 that we specified in our exception. Awesome. And you know what? I want to go back over here to our application, and I'm going to look at our traces. And I want to see that, hey, that post that we got our error, just as an example, this one did error, right? Error is true. We got our response code 400, all of that stuff. So we did track with OpenTelemetry that we have our exception, as you would expect, right? Because that is what's happening here in the exception middleware. We are tracking that exception in our OpenTelemetry stuff. So awesome. All right. Now that's just about it. There's one last thing that I want to do, and this is, I guess you can say this can be controversial. When I talk to people about this, they either like it or they dislike it, and there's never an in-between. So the thing that I like to do is I like using global usings. Yeah, exactly, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and, let's see, underscore usings, and just going to delete all this. It's just an easy way to add a file. So I'm going to say global using system, and let's see, global using system.link, right? And that's kind of it for now. We'll just go ahead and leave those. But over time we'll probably add them. But that makes some of this stuff a little bit easier, right? I can get rid of, oh, well, that one's not there. That one's not there. Great, I need a better example. Well, none in here in the using. Ugh, great. All right. Oh, no, I know why. That's why these are even linked, hidden. Because in our CS project file over here, we left our implicit usings on. As far as implicit usings go, just like with the global usings, it's one of those features where either you like it or you don't like it. Yeah. Personally, I think there's nothing wrong with it. Go ahead and leave it on unless it gets in your way, then remove it or change it in some way. So for now, this global usings is not really useful. That's why these two are grayed out. Nothing's going to hurt it. I would rather have a file there to remember, hey, we can go ahead and just add that if we want, right? Most of the time, it's not going to matter. We're rarely ever going to touch this file. I just think that it's helpful to actually have that in there. All right, and that's it. That is the very basic setup of a brand new ASP.NET Core application. So if I was going to go ahead and set something up new, these are basically the steps that I would go through. Other than some slightly better naming conventions, but not that much better, because as a developer, I'm really bad at naming, just like I'm sure most people are watching this video. So, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave those in comments on the video or on any of those social media links. And until next time, take care.